Hello and welcome to another edition of Soccer to the Max, and I am your host Sean Garmer. Here with me, Mr. Erik Watkins.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been a pretty slow week, hasn't it? Nothing
Yeah,
really special going on.
no, nothing has happened at all. Nothing.
No big
Uh,
deal.
yes, just some huge events that have happened, and one that they're trying to make an even bigger event that we'll talk about. Just want to go ahead and mention that Rachel has work in the morning, so she could not join us, and it, quite possibly for a while it made us see Erik and I. So, hey, it's okay. We are, we're gonna keep rolling on here. Gonna miss Rachel a lot. She brings a certainly unique perspective that both of us are not gonna be able to, um, really do justice. She does a great job of covering the women's game and does a heck of a job also covering like MLS and everything. And wish her the best. She has a lot on her plate with school and work and still writing and everything else. So she's a champ, and wish her the best. Of course, we'll still be talking, and she'll be around to give us ideas and talk to us and everything. So
Of course.
hopefully, if maybe my work schedule allows me to move to the morning time, we can start earlier in the day, and she could be on the show more regularly. But for now, with the way things stand, this is how the show's gonna roll for the time being. But anyway, enough of the of that. We just want to remind you here that you can, of course, watch us live on Twitch every time we do a show. Tuesday nights is our regular episode, so this is going to be more of our. If you've been listening to us since we've returned, this is going to be follow that same format we've been doing with headlines, supporters club, the topics, everything else. We will be doing a show tomorrow as well for the U.S. men's national team final game of the first window between, against Honduras, and considering all the chatter that's been going around, this is now a monumental game. It seems like bigger than when we had done that Canada show. So perhaps we'll have a lot to talk about when we're doing a show really late on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. So that being said, let's kick it off here. And Erik, your your topic here, very
So,
interesting what we've seen so far.
yeah. There's a couple things that can indeed stop World Cup qualifying throughout this little turbulent time. With the big one that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, Argentina and Brazil, where you thought everything was fine. Then a few minutes in, you see a flood of what turned out to be health officials storming the pitch, saying, "Hey, whoa, 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 things aren't okay. You got a couple players that aren't supposed to be here." And everybody's like, "Well, what?" So they're discussing it's madness, and a couple of the Argentine players who flew, as it turns out, without permission from their clubs, Tottenham and Aston Villa, the Tottenham players are facing fines. They flew to the match or participated in the match, breaking Brazilian laws as far as quarantines. So the match was abandoned. They're trying to sort that out. They're looking for the players to be deported because there was, as we mentioned before, helicopters, armored cars, all sorts of things showing up to the round to really get these players. And it's like, you wonder what went behind their decision making to make all of this happen.
Yeah, and
And
you
with
know what's
weeks
weird is
ago,
that like apparently Carnival, the Brazilian Federation, the Brazilian government had okayed this, and supposedly the medical contingent said, "Wait a minute, no." Uh, I mean, when you guys were letting COVID just run rampant in your country, nobody was like really going absolutely crazy about this, but all of a sudden for a soccer match, we got to have helicopters and the police and everyone showing up on in anything in
yeah, in
so it's like is it really about the medical team having the most power? Is it, or is there something else going on?
And this is the rub, because if you look at the policies for those who are traveling within South America, they basically got football passes. They could go play throughout the different CONMEBOL matches. You're traveling even within Brazil, you would be okay. But it's the fact that they flew from overseas that all of a sudden puts a monkey wrench in it. So you're wondering, okay, if you were trying to go ahead and bend to make these matches happen, well, you knew somebody was going to do something to go ahead and get around those rules.
Yeah, that's the thing is right. It's like Villa and Spurs went against the ruling of everyone else because it wasn't supposed to be like Spain, where Spain was they never agreed to this like whole board like Serie A and Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
Spain was a club by club. We're gonna go with this, but we're also gonna every club has the opportunity to do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the EPL was supposed to be across the board. Everybody was agreeing to no, we're not going to release the players. And then all of a sudden, now Romero, who is one of the players, had come out in the media and said, "You're not going to stop us. We're going to find a way to go whether you want to or not." So I think maybe Spurs and Villa kind of didn't want to deal with some angry players and let them go. But it's really weird that you're the only two teams, and of course it's Argentina. It's not like Argentina doesn't have other players they could have put in that spot. Like, I don't know. I get it. Argentina's also saying their federation saying, well, these are not the protocols we agreed to. We agreed to the ones that were in the Copa America, which are not the same as these. And every federation is pointing the finger, right? It's very much like what happened with the Marseille and Nice thing that we talked about, where both teams are pointing the finger at the other. And it's like, why, nobody's going to really fess up to say it's our fault. We shouldn't have done that, So it's not surprising, but it's like, is FIFA going to rule here in one way or the other? Are they going to make them replay the match? Like, what is going to happen here?
Well, obviously, because this is the second thing that they have to deal with now, they would, I would think, have some way to try to play the match. Or unless they can make some sort of agreement with CONMEBOL, maybe Brazil gets a win, even though the match started. Maybe since it was abandoned, you pick it back up at that point or what have you. I don't know, but it's going to be very, very crazy. Then,
yeah, go ahead,
while,
because there's a worse one than this.
Yeah, while all of this was going on, Guinea and Morocco were set to play as well in African World Cup qualifying. But there was a very, very dramatic twist. Now, for this one, because of depending on reporting, various reports, a successful or not coup d'etat that happened the morning the match was supposed to take place. Lots of reports from players, gunfire all around the city, some horrific images that have come out. Players, referees pretty much said, hey, we were told, stay in our hotel, stay away from doors and windows. And now CAF and FIFA are both scrambling, not just for the sake of the match, but for the players' safety to try to get those referees and everyone with Morocco out of the country. Whew.
Yeah, just that is that's almost like Argentina 1978 going on here. Like that's a very extreme case on that end. Like, wow, and how this involves football matches, soccer matches. That's crazy.
Yeah, if it wasn't for me seeing what was going on with Argentina and Brazil, and then they mentioned that blurb about Guinea and Morocco, I would have never heard about it. As crazy as that is.
Yeah, man. It's like you think these things wouldn't happen just because soccer is happening, but
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing that it doesn't matter at times. Like,
Well, I mean, you have situations going back all the way to 1967 when Pele was playing, I believe, in Nigeria, and there was a 10-day ceasefire just so he could play in that match. I believe,
yeah,
who was it? Two Central American countries that basically had the football war in the 70s. So it gets nuts.
yeah, certainly. So I mean, it's interesting at that front, and if you haven't seen either one of these uh, moments, certainly the Brazil Argentina is obviously going to be a big deal because it has both Neymar and Messi involved, and they're kind of both just
Mm-hmm.
standing there like, "What are we going to do at this point?"
They were
But
looking around and it was like, what now?
yeah, what do we do now? And then of course they might get to go back to PSG and joke about that, I'm sure, as well. But would have been interesting because that would have been a big game for both of these squads. I mean, if Brazil were able to get a result at some point, um, you know, you're talking about leading that table, um, really, with a commanding lead over Argentina, having a 9-point gap between them and Argentina if they were able to win. If Argentina are able to win, they close that gap to 3 between them and Brazil. So, it was a major game, and especially the form that Argentina was in, especially having come off that win for Copa America, that was a big game. And so,
Yeah, with
like you're
with
saying, Eric, weird that you're not going to. And if FIFA has to really make a big decision, like that's a big game
yeah,
that you're going to say, look, yes, Brazil, Argentina make the World Cup either way, but remember, if this is all going towards qualifying and towards that FIFA ranking, which does matter for, the draw and everything,
mm-hmm.
that game is important.
Yeah,
And especially if it's between Argentina, let's say Ecuador and Uruguay right now. Now, obviously, there's a lot of games to play still. But right
before.
now, Ecuador and Uruguay are within 3 points of Argentina. Like, that can be the difference between one of those teams getting second, because Argentina doesn't have those 3 points or whatever. So they got to figure out what to do with this.
Yeah, and especially even with the form that Brazil is on, being so dominant in CONMEBOL, just tearing through. Yeah, what happens? So it's going to be a must-see TV to figure out exactly how FIFA and CONMEBOL handle this, especially with, stay tuned for later, other plans that FIFA has in mind.
Yeah, FIFA definitely has some big plans in mind. But before we get to that topic, I wanted to get to my topic here, just because it has to do more with the World Cup qualifying, whereas the one that Eric has is much more in general and something we don't even know how far it's really going to get in the scheme of things. But this did happen, and then I'm talking about the terrible. I'm sorry, it's terrible that we're in 2021 and we still have to talk about this. But in the England and Hungary match, which was their first match that England had in the 3-game window of World Cup qualifying, they defeated Hungary. That wasn't necessarily the reason why this was happening, but Hungary was had some racist chants, and not only racist chants, but they booed the kneel that we know that the Premier League players have been doing before every game.
Mm-hmm.
So that from the start, I think, told you everything you wanted to know about how they felt about this. And then the worst part is they threw cups onto the field as well, or onto the pitch. I'm sorry, and of course Declan Rice had to have a moment to drink from one of them just to mock them a little bit. I think you need to have some levity when you're at times when you're having such a serious thing going on. But obviously, Eric, this is an awful thing. But I think what is the bigger thing for me is Hungary already had a 2-game stadium ban put on by UEFA. FIFA, however, did not have any kind of ban. And because this is a FIFA event, this was allowed to go on. And I'm not understanding. I get it, 2 different governing bodies, but FIFA is supposed to be the ultimate governing body.
Mm-hmm.
Why, when it comes to punishment, when it comes to something that can cause a problem, would you not already honor what that confederation has set forth? Like, if UEFA has a 2-game ban on Hungary fans being able to come into that stadium, you should honor that and say, guess what? I'm sorry, but these are still the same. Although they may not be the exact same people that go to both events, the likelihood of there being a large crossover is extremely there, especially for and this is not the general Hungary populace. These are, once again, ultras.
Oh,
These are, once again, hardcore fans, hooligans, whatever you want to call them. There is a large chance that there is a major crossover between both events. Why would you not honor that?
Very much so. And even with this sort of a thing, yes, these are 2 UEFA countries. This is UEFA's portion of it. But I absolutely agree. UEFA has said, hey, we're not tolerating this within our confederation's borders. Even though it's a FIFA event for qualifying, it is how UEFA determines their qualifying. It's their own unique part of it. So yes, this should have happened. And if I'm UEFA, not only am I coming down even harder on Hungary because of this, I'm directly looking at FIFA and saying, if you're not backing this, we'll take this to Lausanne or the Court of Arbitration for Sport, because this is a bad look for us, even more so than it's a bad look for you. So this is something that's really going to have to be examined thoroughly and, in my opinion, legally.
Yeah, certainly. I know the FA is going to be, once this round is over and they're not having the players there, they're going to be seriously going after FIFA for this. Mm-hmm. And as well they should. Their players should not be subjected to this kind of
not at all
terrible racist behavior, especially when they're going over there to play a football match. We're not talking about anything political, anything like that. This is very much just going over there to do their job, and they should not have to deal with that in any form.
Yeah, and on the heels of what happened and all the reports that came out after the Euro final, England and Italy, so you had all of that to deal with. Now you're dealing with this when you're trying to get something quelled. What are you really going to do when you're doing your best, but other powers that be said, no thanks?
That's why I really appreciated Gareth Southgate ending his part of the press conference on that by saying we need to get our own house in order, noting that same thing about the Euros, about how people, and this is not just happening in soccer, this is happening in the American sports as well. People all of a sudden, they go back outside after having to be locked down and apparently forgot how to act. And that's just called common decency, common humanity. You should not be doing those things. And it's crazy to me that we're still having to deal with that. And again, it's not saying anything about the country in general. We understand it is some very hardcore, terrible people that just wanted to cause a scene, cause attention, that did this. And sadly, unfortunately, because you can't find all of those people, the team has to suffer. And also, I get it that this is what you do. And I get it again that you may not be pointing it at those people, but why as a team are you going and doing the applauding the audience after the game? After what was done? Like, I would not face that crowd. I would go into the back to the changing room and just
Yeah,
say, "Listen, we're not going to applaud this.
yeah,
Whatever this section of the fan base did is not acceptable." And the manager and the players should have um done the same thing there.
yeah.
And,
They
and
should
they
have.
didn't.
And I don't know. I've heard a lot of things we won't get into as far as like a deeper spectrum with Hungary, what's going on there. Maybe this does kind of feed into that greater issue. That line is getting very, very blurry. But either way, if that is indeed the case, then you're looking at a much bigger problem than just what took place on that pitch. Because if it's to that point, then you can make a good bet it's going to happen again and again. And then what do you really do as UEFA? What do you do as FIFA? Because if that's very widespread and prevalent, would you really expect the Hungarian FA to stop it? Not entirely.
No. And they probably wouldn't. And it's sad that that's a thing, apparently. But
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, traveling to Poland, this does not happen for England again. Or we don't really see this the rest of the games that we have left in this window. It's only one set of games that haven't been played, and that's on Wednesday. So just got to get through those games, and that'll be it for this window for a lot of teams until we get to October, once
Mm-hmm.
again, where this starts all over. So, you know, this is a a major thing that we'll have to keep an eye on here
Mm-hmm.
as time moves on for these World Cup qualifiers and what happens there. So, moving on to the I guess major topic for this show is something that has been, I feel like it hasn't been talked about enough, mainly because it's still in the planning stages, right? It's not something that has gained a lot of ground. And, you know, what is going to happen if this does gain ground? Because right now, FIFA has Arsene Wenger, our legendary Arsenal coach,
Mm-hmm.
going out there and trying to get this trying to get this promoted, trying to get this going. And well, apparently Eric has to go do something, so I am by myself here, live. Sometimes doing things live doesn't necessarily work out, but I'll go ahead and I guess say my piece on it before going on to Eric. Hopefully he'll come back in a few here. But what I'm alluding to is the decision by FIFA to go ahead and really start trying to make a point about having the World Cup be every 2 years.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
Sometimes
but
things happen.
well, but you actually had mentioned that and kind of set me up perfectly because we mentioned Arsene Wenger. He's been kind of spearheading this idea of
No.
not just the biennial World Cup, but literally having what will be a World Cup every year, alternating between men's and women's tournaments.
Yeah. But essentially you would have a men's World Cup every 2 years instead of every
Yeah.
4 years.
Right. And same thing with women's tournament. You have a women's World Cup every 2 years as well. Since with all of this, it's not just Arsene Wenger's on board.
Saudi
France is
Arabia's on board.
Yeah, France, Saudi Arabia,
France is on
CONMEBOL.
board, are they? I thought
Yes.
it was only Saudi Arabia right now. Really? France is
No.
on board. Okay.
For Saudi Arabia, France, and CONMEBOL. All of them say, hey, we're down for this. So now
CONMEBOL must not care about killing the Copa America because, like, And I understand that where the Gold Cup keeps going, I don't maybe is a big deal for the Caribbean countries
Mm-hmm.
and some of the Central American countries, but for the bigger countries, that doesn't really matter. I think what matters here a lot is most of UEFA is not, and UEFA itself is very concerned about this because this would obviously affect the Euros big time. Because they're held basically the other 2 years that you don't have a World Cup or whatever, it's the Euros. So,
Exactly.
now you're basically taking their spot, and then it almost makes the Euros kind of like feel like, well, do they matter? Do we care about them that much if there's a World Cup every 2 years? I mean, yeah, it's cool to have a more of a World Cup, but also I get obviously FIFA doesn't give two craps about the Olympics. If for
And
them, the Olympics could not exist for soccer and they would be totally fine.
yeah.
But you know, uh,
So, and this is my big thing because if they were to do this, the big thing would be okay, do you have your confederational championships, Gold Cup, Euros, Copa America? Do you have them act as qualifiers? How do you fit them in the different international windows? One thing that I had mentioned, okay, you already have the Olympics as a full senior tournament for women. Do you make it a full senior tournament? No. And then you just go ahead and create a different U23 system or a tournament for the men. So it's how are you going to feasibly pull this off and flood the calendar? Because you're going to be losing huge swaths of matches if you do this. What are you comfortable losing, and what are the confederations comfortable losing?
yeah, certainly this is a big deal for.
Yeah, this a tremendous deal because the confederations who would honestly benefit mainly Asia, Africa certainly because they have different types of championships every 2 years. They can adjust to that. Oceania, of course, but your bigger confederations amongst that's a major adjustment to their schedules. Major
Yeah, I
adjustment.
mean, we don't know how much revenue the African Cup of Nations or the Asian Cup bring
Mm-hmm.
in from those countries. Those get alternated on who hosts them as well. It's not like the World Cup where I'm sorry, but there's certain countries that they're just not going to go to anymore, and they've
No.
said it themselves. After the South Africa World Cup, they said it would be very hard for them to go back to Africa. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Asian countries, depending on which country we're talking about, it's difficult for them to go to those countries because the time difference. Look at the
Exactly.
Olympics this year being in Japan. How many things were missed? I mean, now granted, a lot of people are used to the Olympics. You watch things on tape delay or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but you have to think about with social media, with
Yeah.
the prevalence of everything being in your face now.
Yeah. Perfect example with
It,
that.
it's so hard not to wake up and just see the score
Yeah,
or
and
get spoiled.
yeah, perfect example of this. Imagine if you had social media, Facebook, Twitter, and everything as it is now, when you had the '02 World Cup in Korea and Japan.
Yeah,
The US during their shock run, those matches were live 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
exactly.
All the people who were up late night, they're going to be talking about it. And then what would be the point of re-airing when everybody knows and has clips and all these things? You're right. You wake up the next day, it's spoiled. Then what?
Exactly. And it's just that's the thing is so there's only certain places you're going to have World Cups now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also again even the Euros like now granted they said they would probably never do what happened with the Euro 2020 where they did it in so many different places or whatever.
Yeah.
But still having the two host nations or three host nations
Mm-hmm.
like with the World Cup 2026 um you know that could still happen. And so you can have these smaller countries be involved in that. If
Yeah.
you take a lot of that away, or at least the relevance of that, right? Like, again, you also have to look at the players. Now, granted, this is cool for this is cool from a commercial perspective, a
Yep.
marketing perspective,
Yep.
all the making money perspectives,
Yep.
all the, oh, well, we get to see the World Cup more often. So that's cool, but look at the players. That the
Mm-hmm.
players already play so many games throughout a regular club season for so many of these leagues. They play cup games, they play Champions League if you're in the Champions League, Europa, Conference, and then you're playing your league season,
Yeah. You could
playoffs,
easily 50 to 60 matches a year for your
Yeah, and
club.
then so let's say everything stays the same, right? So then you have your confederations tournament, and then you also have a World Cup every 2 years now. And it's like that is a lot. That is a
It,
lot for those players,
it
you
really
know.
is. And while I know some players would love the opportunity to be able to play in more World Cups throughout their career, I get that. But at the same time, you're right. There would have to be at least some sort of balance in each confederation, specifically UEFA, with all of their tournaments or their continental club tournaments. They would have to say, okay, some of these may have to go. The players
Yeah.
may not
I
be
mean,
interested.
there is a way to do this, right? In that, what if you do some kind of the idea that FIFA wanted to do eventually, right? Was a global nations league. What if you do a global nations league to do qualifying, right? And so
Yeah,
there's not so many fixtures because not only that, right? You would then have to have World Cup qualifying the year in between the two World Cups. So essentially, you're always doing World Cup stuff
exactly. And
constantly.
that's what I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
saying. You would have
yeah,
to make some sort of confederational championship, like how CONCACAF did it back in the 80s. The top
yeah,
team at the final round of World Cup qualifying for 86 got the CONCACAF championship trophy. You would have
yeah.
to do something like that. Or either, as you say, all of those confederational championships acting as qualifiers,
Yeah,
or
basically it's your Confed Cup, the idea that
yeah,
they have with the Confed Cup, right?
yeah,
Of now those Confed Cups, those Confederation Championships are now essentially World Cup qualifying.
exactly. So
And then Gold Cup would have to be every 4 years. African Cup of Nations would have to be they would have to be every 2 years now. And
yeah,
so
because you will
everything
be doing those.
that's the problem too, right? Is if you
Hmm.
do it that way, then Euros has to be every 2 years.
Yep,
Everything else has to be every two. Copa America has to be every 2 years,
yep.
or whatever. So it's like that's the pro. It's again, this is great for a commercial perspective, but for the players,
Hmm.
for the exhaustion level,
Yeah, for
right?
just the sheer logistics.
Of and this is for fans too, right? Because
Hmm.
who's going to go to these games? The same fans. Are they
Hmm.
going to have money every single year to be able to pay for these grand events that you're going to have to put on around the world to just be able to do a World Cup every 2 years? And then not only that, it's just like you're also watering it down.
Yep.
So, do people care the same way as because it's the same thing as the Winter and Summer Olympics, right?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the Winter Olympics just don't get the same amount of play that the Summer Olympics do, right? Whether it's because of certain sports
Yeah.
or whatever, they don't get the same amount of love a lot of times. Now, this Olympics that just happened is a total anomaly because of COVID, and Japan didn't
Hmm.
even want to do it.
Hmm.
The Japanese people didn't want it. Like it was not something that was really celebrated, to be honest.
No.
So putting that one aside, traditionally the Summer Olympic Games have a much bigger cachet and everything the Winter Olympic Games do. And it's crazy to think that the Winter Olympic Games are about to happen this summer or this winter as well.
Yeah. The Winter Olympics in Beijing, whole other story yet again for this time around. We're now 5 months away. They're in February. And the reason why the Winter Olympics moved up until 92, the Winter and Summer Olympics were in the same calendar year. Then the IOC was like, okay, this is a problem organizing everything with this in the same year and all this and that. Plus, the Winter Olympics so much smaller, fewer sports, fewer athletes, to have it in specific climates and things. Let's move it. So then, after Albertville in 92, they immediately moved it to Lillehammer in 94. And they've been on that alternate path ever since. But even with that, you're right. Unless you're hockey, curling like I am, biathlon like I am, or figure skating or whatever, you don't really care about the Winter Olympics. You don't.
Yeah.
So that gets pushed aside. So with these tournaments, they're going to gradually get pushed aside. And even if they implement the idea of a global nations league, how are you going to tie that into best teams in each confederation anyways? You're going to have to somehow. Otherwise, all of those tournaments would be scrapped.
Yeah, certainly. It's just that it's a logistical nightmare, honestly. I mean, you can look. It's a cool sounding thing on paper. I want more World Cups. I want to see this. But I think honestly, there are so many people that, again, with the availability of club football, especially of the top 5 leagues, the more you kick the ball down that road and the more they're available, I wonder sometimes if the international game, the more you water it down, the more you could hurt it than help it.
Yeah.
And then just there's so, again, like you only have such of an availability of players. Like unless you're gonna do like the Olympics and limit the player pool, right, or something, like you're gonna start seeing players go, well, you know what, I'm gonna opt out of this one.
Yep.
Or it's like, do you stand a chance of there being a lot of backlash against us? I think especially in Europe. Of course, CONMEBOL is gonna say yes, they want money. Like this is the same confederation that just had a freaking Copa America in Brazil that has one of the worst COVID rates, and at the time, and probably still even now, and it's like, you're really gonna do that just to have a Copa America? Like,
and they intentionally wanted the Copa America. After they said with Argentina, it's like, hey, we've got this going on, this isn't happening. Brazil was like, come on here. Even though it was an extra tournament, and they've had 2 extra Copas alongside the regularly scheduled ones just in the past 5 years.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how you make this necessarily work, but it's just not, it's almost like the Super League to me. It's just not a good idea. I don't know. There's something special about knowing, man, we got to get through a long time before we get to the next one. And again, and I get it, like there's a wait there. There's oh man, something could really happen in that 4 years before the next one. Like, it's a nice idea in theory, but it's just like, man, they would really have to sacrifice a lot to make that happen. And with many of these a lot of these confederations, UEFA is really the only one that can stand against them. But you also can't have a World Cup without UEFA.
No.
So
you can't.
You can, but it won't be legitimate.
Yeah, because if you look at it, Uruguay still complains European teams didn't want to travel for the inaugural tournament in 1930. Plus, with the makeup now of 32 teams, 13 UEFA spots. When you expand it in 2026 to the 48, 16 UEFA spots. how are you going to have
a
a
quarter
tournament
of
without
a
a
quarter
third
of the
of your
tournament,
team?
right?
Yeah.
Or a third. Yeah, it's like, how are you going to do a World Cup with? I mean, you're talking about one of the reasons why they're doing it is because, oh, well, there's countries that never get in, that maybe they would get in this way. I was like, well, yeah, maybe, I guess in Europe or in, I don't know. I mean, the chance is there, obviously, right? Their idea is, but that's not that's one of the few actual like good reasons they're doing it. This is all about money.
Exactly.
This is all about commercial viability. FIFA needs the money. They want to make the international game the dominant game. Like,
seeing the patterns with Infantino, having eyes on the future football cup, which we've talked about and I tweeted about, fundamental rule changes to the game itself, fundamental changes to the calendar. Let's face it, Infantino was right along those lines where, as the saying goes, if it makes dollars, it makes sense.
yeah. But it's like, it's also just the fact that I feel like you need to have less fixtures, not more. And
Completely
you're just
agree.
congesting the calendar more. Like, you don't need more stuff to have to deal with right now.
Yeah,
So,
it's more is simply more. And UEFA can take a lesson from this too. More is just more. More isn't better.
at this point, like, listen, I wouldn't be surprised if this goes further ahead because I'm sure FIFA can find more people that want to do this. But if UEFA really stands against it, man, this is not going to go anywhere and be very much like the Super League, an idea that just was an idea and dies. And
asterisk on that one.
yeah, we'll see. But it's just like, at this point, it's almost better to have the other idea that FIFA wanted to do, which was like have a club, like an actual real club World Cup. And instead of doing that. But it, that will probably never happen because the club, all those crazy clubs would have to sign on, and I don't know if they would do that. But this is we probably talked about this more than I thought we were going to, but it's a big topic. I don't think it's a good idea. I wouldn't be surprised if this is still going on past the 22 World Cup happening. And it will probably get revived there. They will probably try to, before the 2026 World Cup, have this figured out, whether this is going to be a thing or not.
Of course.
Yeah. So we will move it along here to the last topic that we're going to talk about. This was Rachel's topic originally. Since we already had this planned out before she had kind of told us what's going on, the NWSL got hit a big blow here to, I feel like, the players and its big game, in that you're playing the NWSL championship in Portland on turf when there are so many grass stadiums now available. Big grass stadiums. We're not talking about like, oh, they're all small little tiny stadiums you can't fit hardly 10,000 people in. We're talking about major stadiums. And you're going to play the game at 9 a.m. Pacific time because you have to get on CBS before the big college football game. Like, wow. That is such a terrible thing for those players, Eric. I mean, getting up at 5 a.m. to eat?
It's terrible for the players because you've got to eat at 5 a.m. and then you're going through pre-match warm-ups and everything, probably closer to about 7:30, final things going on, and a 9 a.m. kickoff. So by the time the match is over, 11 or noon, you're shot. Plus, even again, going back to logistics, number one, it was great. The NWSL was continuing to make steps forward, having their championship game on CBS. You knew with expansion and extending the season, while they would be very beneficial. You're getting to a deep in the season point to where, hey, CBS has got other priorities. They are the SEC and college football kings. And you're getting to November 20th, the day of the championship game. That is in the thick of college football season. That's when they have their best games. So CBS is saying, hey, this is what helps make us our money. I'm sorry, NWSL. We've got to sit and talk. This won't work.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. This is about CBS, and this is like basically asking CBS, oh, well, you got to take the NFL game off that day so you can put the NWSL on. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with college football either. That is their major moneymaker aside from the NFL game of that week or whatever. Like, you're barking up the wrong tree with that one. Even if this was MLS, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like ESPN is not going to move stuff very much for college football games for MLS either. So like this is just not a good look as far as I get it. You got to be on CBS because you need the ratings. You need all eyes on this. People that have antennas can watch this game. You don't have to have cable. You don't have to have Paramount Plus. You don't have to have CBS Sports Network. You want to be on big CBS. I get that from a NWSL perspective.
Yeah.
Right? Like but this is the league has to think about this from a different perspective of, isn't the most important thing in your league the players?
Exactly.
Like, this is bad for the players on twofold.
Yeah, because, okay, if you're committed to that noon time slot, why Portland? Why does it have to be Portland again? Yes, Portland is still a relatively new stadium, but between the time zone difference, between the turf, you could easily have this.
Well, they're picking Portland because of the atmosphere.
Okay.
Right? They're picking Portland because you know it's going to be full.
Okay, but you're telling me, yes, you're guaranteeing full. Would you even necessarily guaranteeing full if those fans are going to have to be up and at the park at 9 a.m? I mean, yeah.
Well,
you can go ahead and tailgate with, eggs and bacon and pancakes and everything. I've seen that happen before, but logistically, how? If you're keeping this at a noon Eastern time spot, you can have it on into the East Coast or have it somewhere in the Eastern time zone. Be better for fans, easier time for them to get there and be ready and pump up the crowd. Easier to air, easier on the players, all that. I don't know. I see a whole bunch of wrongs with this one. And then on top of that, as you had mentioned, playing on the turf. How many times have we seen a lot of players all around saying, hey, turf is not the best for us?
We saw this from Ali Krieger. She tweeted out that I can't believe we're playing the championship game on turf. Alyssa Nair was upset about the time. Like, we're talking about big games. Like this is the biggest game of the season for that for that company, and
and you're throwing all of this. Well, not entirely throwing it away, but close to it, ignoring what's a huge pivotal moment for your brand just by doing this. This is something that sets a lot of leagues back. It really does. I mean, I don't know. It seems like the NWSL is married to this idea. Realistically, they shouldn't be. And I hope, since we're far enough out, that some sort of alternative can happen. But if this is how you're starting, basically being a self-contained league, you're making decisions like this about your championship, that's something you really need to think about up top, because your fans are thinking about it. Your players are certainly thinking, and rightfully letting everyone know their thoughts about it. it's up to you to listen.
Yeah, I don't see how the fans are gonna be happy about having to get up at 9 a.m. for this kind of thing either. Like you said, it's just it doesn't make sense on so many levels. I don't know why we're doing it. It's I get it. Again, you need to be on big CBS, but you don't need to be on CBS that bad that you're hurting the rest of what makes that game special.
Yes.
For to be on CBS, because guess what? It's a rating. It's one rating that's not going to determine whether you get picked up by CBS again, because CBS knows why you can't be on big CBS. Like, if CBS is going to decide that one game on whether or not to pick you up for another season or whatever, they know why you can't be on big CBS. Like, they know their own schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have to be on big CBS later in the day, or you're not on big CBS, you're on Paramount Plus and CBS Sports Network and YouTube or whatever, they're going to take all those numbers and they're going to know, hey, we know that you're in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just, this is another conversation for another time about should MLS and NWSL get on the FIFA calendar. But we should have that topic one day. I think it'd be an interesting topic for us to talk about.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to go into that here because
we're planning on that. So that's something we can really dissect.
I mean, look, we don't need. They would take us. Really, this will make it a really long podcast. We don't need to do that. So, to end this here, bad move by NWSL. Bad move by everybody that had to make that decision. Terrible move. You do not care about your players. You don't care about the fans. Like, you're making them get up at freaking 8 a.m. to be available for this. Like, it's dumb. So, let's go ahead. That's going to be it for wait. Let's do this really quickly here. Supporters Club. Erik, basically it's just domestic stuff here, because all the other leagues were international break at this point. Venezuela was terrible, as you'd expect. 2 games, 2 red cards, no goals. Almost, I can't remember the guy's name. He almost freaking crippled Messi. What a terrible tackle that was. He deserves to be suspended if he's not been already. And I cannot condone that at all. It's absolute ridiculous. You don't need it. And you already had, I think he was only playing because the other Venezuelan defender had torn his ACL, I think, early in the game or whatever. So it's still, look, Venezuela is one of the worst teams in. They have gone past that time where they had a moment. They are not in that anymore, and it's sad to see that what the team has become now, going back to those years of just playing dirty to try to get by, and it's frustrating for me. Good on England for playing extremely well in both of their games. Obviously, they played Andorra in the second one. There's only so much you can take out of that, but definitely have a big game against Poland coming up on Wednesday that I think will really cement where they are and definitely being the big leaders of the group that they're in. And Dallas lost a tough one to Real Salt Lake. They were up 1-0, then down 3-1. Nova Ricardo Pepe, obviously. Jesus Ferreira with a fantastic goal that you need to go watch to put it 3-2, but wasn't enough. And good on Dallas for at least trying to come back, but they couldn't do it. Erik?
Yeah, for everybody else, as you say, they were out. Junior Urso, thank you so much. Orlando City, 2-0 lead against Columbus. Great. Crew come back and equalize. Terrible. Basically, with DK in his form, banging him in just like he did as Barnsley. Urso comes in, gets the winner, 3-2. Well, it is a little bit unfortunate because I know Rachel was at this game. She would have really helped provide that extra perspective, but very glad that we're still towards the top of that chase pack behind New England. Oh, I can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. And then, of course,
Yeah.
with Rachel, like as she had mentioned, we talked about in CONCACAF Costa Rica and World Cup qualifying, Russia with a big 2-0 win over Malta. Very good on them. And in the NWSL, OL Reign and Louisville playing to a draw. Ooh, we've got quite a bit going on, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and Russia tied on points with Croatia in that group. They have been doing well to keep pace right now with Croatia. So, you know, like it's been really fun to watch these international qualifiers. Some of these groups are really tight right now in the UEFA, like Netherlands, Norway tied on points, Croatia, Russia. I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
so it's gonna be a fun one for some of these groups to watch them play out. Spain and Sweden, with Spain falling to Sweden to give and they're really tight right now with their group. Portugal and Serbia keeping up with each other. So some of these are really going to be going down to the wire, and we know what happens when you're second in those groups. Go into those playoffs. It's never a given at all.
Nope.
What's gonna happen in Armenia is also there with Germany too. So yeah, man, this is gonna be an interesting thing for sure when it comes to that. But ending it here for this week on Soccer to the Max for Eric and myself. Man, it'll be a fun to get back to the club scene. Of course, Manchester United getting to debut Ronaldo on Saturday. He may not start. He may come off the bench. We'll see how that goes, but definitely going to be a fun one for Saturday. Obviously, in that bad kickoff window for England, though, because actually, the Europe. At least in the UK, you cannot watch the 3 p.m. kickoff game, which is 10:30 kickoff here in the morning, because it's a mandatory blackout to make sure that people go to the stadium. So that is still in place, unfortunately. Don't think they're going to change that for one player. And yeah, if he debuts, you're not going to be able to see it live. You'll have to watch it on Goal Zone or whatever later, or on replay or whatnot in
I'm
the UK.
sure match of the day will be all over it. If not, they should
Yeah.
be. I'm looking at you, BBC. You already know
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah, they are. They are. But it will be fun to get back to club football. Again, we'll be back tomorrow with the final U.S. men's national team game against Honduras. That game starts at 10 o'clock at night. So we'll be ending at like around 12. And then, we'll have a show right after that. And then that's it for World Cup qualifying for at least a month. And we'll get back to club soccer for the most part. So until tomorrow, we'll see you later, everybody.
Peace.